Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the first session of the community practice for the year 2004. For this afternoon's event, we shall be looking into a very interesting topic on adapting materials for a more inclusive ESL classroom, focusing on the representation of families in course books. For our speaker, she is coming from the American University of Phnom Penh. Please welcome Jean Wilcox. Take it away, Jean.
Thank you, Fillmore. So good afternoon, and this presentation is going to consider inclusivity in the ESL classroom. In particular, how families are represented in course books. So families are complicated. If you picture a family in your mind's eye, what do you see? Is it a large family? Is it a small family? Is it your family, or is it more like a stock image? So hopefully the slides are moving. To begin with, I will define inclusivity and inclusion and discuss why it is important in planning lessons, and I will explain why the representation of solely nuclear families causes the problem for inclusivity. Then I will examine how families appear in course books. I'll use specific examples and then give some ideas about how these might be adapted, and I will welcome any questions and comments at the end. So what does inclusivity mean and why is it important? Inclusivity is a sense of belonging to a group. It is a group that acknowledges differences and embraces them. Inclusion in a classroom creates a community within that class, and each person within that class, each student, should feel they have an equal voice and an equal part of that community. And why is this important? So Cynthia Nelson promotes the idea that active participation by all is a part of inclusivity, and that inclusivity promotes this idea. An active student, they learn faster and they learn more, they retain the knowledge better than a passive student. This is particularly true in a language learning classroom. Extensive research has been done in the fields of inclusive practices for gender and sexual identity and for race. And I have used the work of John Gray, Andreas Bollas and Nick Dennis as sources for this presentation. Inclusion creates a deeper awareness of a lived experience of others. And so students who don't feel part of a class can feel excluded from that class. And the deeper awareness of the lived experience of others can help the students to have a more empathetic classroom, and it really helps to build the community. Authentic materials, as Robertson Cook have found, give the learner a more authentic voice. So if we're going to give students the chance to express their own ideas, we need to encourage these authentic materials. Non-nuclear family structures are nothing new. Even in the distant past, there were different family structures. For example, single parenthood could be the result of any number of factors, and in history, it could be to do with war, famine, disease, or death in childbirth, in the same way that it these can impact families now. And it was not uncommon to lose both parents as a result of an epidemic, for example. And children could be raised in any number of family structures. They could be raised by another family member, in an orphanage, in a charitable institution, a religious community, in a workhouse, or they could have been raised by a village. And from the past until now, parents have often gone abroad, left their children with the grandparents, and be working abroad to send money home to the family. In a class of adults, their own parenting experience could be this, as well as their childhood experience. So how uncomfortable would it be for someone in a classroom to see only nuclear family structures given as a model? Modern classrooms may have a complexity of family structures within them, and these should be embraced. In Western classrooms, it's no longer uncommon for children to have parents that are same-sex couples. Parents can be from different ethnic backgrounds, they might be from different religious backgrounds. And it's essential that we give the students in our class the linguistic tools, I can't even say that, the linguistic tools to describe their own family situation. Family structures that are non-nuclear or not heteronormative can cause real problems for students learning if all they see is that the traditional model. And embarrassment could prevent them from speaking. They could become the subject of bullying. So the freedom to describe their family structure without censure or judgment is really important in the classroom, any classroom, but especially a language learning one. So why does the representation of only nuclear families cause a problem in terms of inclusivity? So while exclusion may affect a student's place in the classroom community permanently, so there are more serious exclusions and more significant exclusions than the family representation. If a student feels excluded due to race, gender, sexuality, or disability, obviously this can have an impact on every single lesson that they attend. Perhaps exclusions due to family structures could be described as a micro exclusion, and it might just alienate the student from the community during a lesson or a number of lessons. However, even a cursory glance at the course books used in an ESL classroom, the absolutely predominant family structure is a nuclear family, a heteronormative nuclear family. And the relentless reinforcement that this is a model family can really be problematic. Even when there are alternate descriptions offered, these are often ambiguous rather than definite. For example, in American English File 1, how do we interpret the family structure of Christina's favorite day? She says that she spends lunch with her mother and brother. Is this a single parent family, or where is the father? Is the father at work? Is the father playing golf, for example? The fact that it's a lunch and not a dinner, it feeds the ambiguity. It's easier to explain the absence of the father at lunchtime. This is, sorry, it's a screenshot, it's not very good, of Christina's favorite day and her talking about her favorite day and spending lunch with her mother and brother. So how ESL books portray families. So ESL course books are conservative and offer an idealized view of British and American culture. They normalize the traditional nuclear family. However, the concept that learners study English to engage with the culture of the UK or America is really outdated now. English is the lingua franca of international business or international politics. And I don't think students study English to aspire to the culture of the UK or the US anymore. Even if students intend to move to English-speaking countries, for example, my students quite often say they would like to study in the US. It doesn't follow that they will come into contact with nuclear families. I appreciate that publishers wish to sell books and that market forces are employed, but market forces have changed along with societal changes. A lot of books have already made changes. There are less sexist roles for women in the books. People of color often appear, and sometimes disabilities are shown. However, this is not true when it comes to the nuclear family. So which course books did I choose? I just want to say that I selected these books because I've used them in class and that I'm familiar with them. And I've chosen them to cover a range of the common European framework of reference levels for language learning. So I chose Success Beginner, American English File, Cutting Edge Elementary, Headway Intermediate, Speak Out Upper Intermediate, and English File Advanced. And all of these are excellent books, and they're not, I'm not selecting them to criticize them. So why did I choose them? They're internationally popular, and I chose random levels for each book. So I didn't specify the book that focused on families. And I worked my way through each book and looked at how they represented families. So if I look at how books represent and teach vocabulary, Success Beginner, Unit 3, it gives a basic family structure in a short reading, and that introduces the students to the vocabulary. Elementary Cutting Edge, a similar structure and the same grammar point, possessives. And American English File has the same grammar point again, but this time it has pairs of celebrities and asks students to guess the relationship. These celebrities are probably not relevant celebrities for most of the students in Southeast Asia. Books aimed at higher levels than elementary assume that students already know the vocabulary to describe families, so they don't introduce it. So how can we adapt these materials to make them more accessible? Well, one of the ways that I have tried in class is I will open the discussion with an alternate family tree. I use my own family, complete with divorces, stepsisters, stepfather, and all the other sort of dysfunctional, I guess, bits of my family. And this has a mixed success rate. I have taught that class, and my co-teacher in a particular lesson said, "Oh, Jin, I'm really sorry for your family." So I don't know that it was that successful. Another thing that could be more successful is to use fictional characters and use the family tree from the fictional character. So if we look at someone like Jane Eyre, she is an orphan who lives with her aunt and her cousins. She she becomes a governess to the daughter of the mistress of Mr. Rochester. There's a mad wife in the attic, so there's quite a lot that can be used there, though this is quite a complex book, so maybe it's difficult for beginners. Another thing that I think is successful is to use fictional characters like superheroes. superheroes often have non-nuclear families. So Wonder Woman lives on an all-female island raised by her mother and her aunts. Spider-Man is an orphan raised by his aunt and his uncle. So these characters, their family trees can be expanded by the students using their imaginations. Oh, it won't move on. Oh, yeah, it will. Okay, so speaking and writing, the productive skills, they tend to have the same kind of lessons. One of them, they'll be speaking their ideas, and another one, they'll be writing the ideas down. So in books aimed at A1 and A2 learners, so beginners and elementary, speaking usually follows the vocabulary that they've learned, and they will be asked to use their family tree to explain it to their partner. So in this case, it's quite simple for the students to use the fictional family tree, and that takes away any embarrassment about how their family structure is different, maybe from heteronormative nuclear family, their traditional family. And they can use their imagination. So it's really great at developing critical thinking, at developing creativity. Headway Intermediate has a listening exercise about the closest member of a family. And after the listening, the student is asked to describe the closest member of their family. So here, instead of it being a family member, maybe it can be the closest adult or a best friend, because it's just asking the students to use descriptive words. English File Advanced asks students to answer complex questions around a family theme. Would you like to work with your parents or your siblings? So simply change the focus of the question. Would it be better to work with people you're close to already, or with people you don't know yet? The writing exercises usually follow the same pattern. So, but there's an added benefit here, that removing the personalization of the topic. So I have two brothers, he has, it allows them to use subject-verb agreement, and that is something that a lot of students struggle with. So this is my closest relative. Sorry, it's a screenshot. It's not very good. Okay, so now we move to reading. So the receptive skills, both reading and listening, again, similar structures. We usually use prediction. We look at the title and we look at the images, and we ask the students to predict what the text is going to be about. But if we can push them to use greater imagination, we can develop critical thinking skills. Success beginner, we could take the pictures out of context. So if I just quickly whiz through to the success beginner page, here there's a picture of a woman, and then it says Darren is a husband. Now the students could predict who Darren is the husband to. It doesn't have to be Victoria if you take the pictures out of context. And who are Sam and Dave? Ask the students to predict. Maybe they're not just simply, I don't know, a brother or something. Maybe they could be in a relationship. Who are the children? Who are the older couple? So if we ask the students to predict, they might actually predict a more interesting text than the text that they're given. Some things are really strange, like in American English File, they introduced Marilyn Monroe, and I think Marilyn Monroe has very little to do. She'll be completely unfamiliar to most students in a Southeast Asian class, and she's probably really unfamiliar to most of Generation Z as well. Her upbringing is completely sanitized in the reading text. She had a really difficult upbringing. Her father was absent. Her mother had mental problems. I don't even know why they chose her as an example. Headway Intermediate has got a very bizarre family called the Angelo brothers, who basically got locked into their house by their father, who wouldn't ever let them leave, which is quite a good way of talking about how families are not always cozy and comfortable places, people to live with. Speak Out Intermediate does talk about Maya Angelou, and she does come from a non-nuclear family background. And English File Advanced, it talks about how to survive living with your parents. So making predictions about the title and discussing again the negative and positive implications of family, making it less of a model family and more to do with the real life experiences of the students can really help. Sorry, this is this strange family who were locked in by their father. Listening again is a receptive skill where prediction has a really key role. So it can really build critical thinking and imagination. So in Success Beginner, Tim is talking to his parents on the phone. So again, use the image to make predictions. The one that I like is American English File. The images, the story that is in the listening is quite dull, but the images could be used to make quite an imaginative story. So here we've got kids in the back, there's a car driving down a lonely road, there's headlights and it's dark, and the parents are looking at each other. That I think the students could predict a far more interesting story than the actual story that they listen to. And they can then use that to speak and to write. Headway listening, My Closest Relative, again, use pictures to predict relationships and try and encourage the students to use their imagination and don't be obvious. And in English File Advanced, again, the English File Advanced is quite good. It looks at Frida Kahlo's family, which has complex issues and themes, though it is still mostly a nuclear family. So in conclusion, don't know why the picture doesn't come. Although it could be seen that representing families as nuclear heteronormative could be seen as a micro exclusion, it is essential that the students feel that they belong in the class and that they're not excluded from that lesson. And non-nuclear family structures are not new, so they've always existed. So this is not a strange thing to introduce. When we're introducing vocabulary, maybe use fictional characters to create family trees. In speaking and writing, change the focus. Get the students to use their imagination. Same with reading and listening. Use prediction and imagination to open up possibilities. And looking to the future, just as books have started to become less sexist and less racist, hopefully more materials will be produced that are considering all kinds of exclusion, not just maybe the more significant ones. Here are my references. So these are all really great articles and books. And so any questions or ideas that you want to share?
All right. Thank you very much, Jean, for the very interesting talk. I think this is actually a gateway of going beyond the stereotypes as far as portrayal of families are concerned in books, especially in English books. Of course, we'll be inviting now our colleagues who have joined us. If you have any question or any ideas that you'd like to share with us, we'll be happy to listen to them.
Ideas are welcome as well.
We're getting, hey Jen, I like the idea of the like the superheroes and stuff. That's a great idea, and especially there's so many superheroes now, and what are they, Avengers or whatever that's out there.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know who these characters are. Like to have the students come up with kind of the backstory and who they are and stuff like that. That's great. Or like or whatever kind of characters that they would like to kind of create, their family tree and.
Absolutely, and it could be a book that they've read themselves as well. It doesn't have to be.
Have you done that with students?
Yeah.
Have you done that with?
Yeah, I've tried it with the superheroes, and it's quite fun.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like it.
I'm actually curious about the example that you gave featuring Marilyn Monroe. I'm curious if have you actually used that in your actual lesson, or what if that's the example? What if that's the example in a text that you have to teach? How would you still use it, but how could you make use of it despite the fact that it's the story that's been written is like a sanitized version of the actual occurrences?
I mean, I would actually talk about her real story and maybe try and find a bit more information to like expand the story, because she had quite a tragic life, but also she started out with all these problems. You know, her father abandoned them, her mother got mental problems, she got married really, really young to get away from the family that she was in, and she married this guy just to get out of the family. So it's actually quite an interesting discussion to open with the students, particularly in an adults class. I don't know if it would work with the teens particularly. But and I just think that I don't know why they use Marilyn Monroe, because I know her. Maybe you know her, but my 19-year-olds wouldn't have any clue who she is, and that is part of the problem with course books as well, is they can be very quickly irrelevant. But I mean, this isn't even quickly irrelevant. This was irrelevant before it was printed and before it was written, probably. Rajiv, did you have a question? You've got your hand up. Oh, your mic's off. Can you turn your mic on?
Thanks, Rajiv.
Yeah.
There.
Thanks, Jen. It was a fantastic presentation. Going back to materials development and materials evaluation after a few years, it's very nice for me. So, I mean, you have probably pointed out some of the weaknesses in the present day textbooks. I mean, as people say, I don't have a question. I'm just making a comment here. We talk about input, processes, and output. If the input is good, then the activity, processes, and then what the students produce will be good. But then if the materials or the textbook is fundamentally flawed, then we can't expect much out of the material. Yeah, I was just wondering whether you used any criteria for your evaluation, or you did a more of a norm reference. And I mean, you did say your selection was random. That's fine. But even within the random selection of the units or the text, did you use, I mean, because people like Brian Tomlinson and others have developed something called as criterion referenced evaluation. Just a quick question. I mean, that's all. Thanks. You don't have to answer right now. Yeah.
It's fine. I generally, there were a couple of reasons why I chose books. The ability to download them in Cambodia. From the
availability, basically.
From a source that I could find. So it was either a book that I'd used already and I'd been given a soft copy of, or it was a book that I was able to access a soft copy of. I used Headway at ACE in Cambodia, but it was a really old version. It had like Friends in it, like the TV show. But I downloaded the more recent version because I didn't really want to go too far back, because then they are going to be irrelevant. And a lot of issues, a lot of books, like I said, have improved how they depict people of color, how they depict women. We're not mums in the kitchen doing the washing up anymore. And they are starting to show people with disabilities, but I think it's very easy I don't know, when you pictured in your mind's eye a family, did you see a like stock photo? Because I think I see a stock photo when I see in my mind's eye a family. I see like mum, dad, kid, and my family's mad. So then if I try and like flick it out of my head and get like my family in there, then it turns into this huge family with I don't know, cousins and all kinds of. My mum married again. I've got a stepdad. I've got 5 stepsisters, but I don't really think of them as stepsisters per se because we didn't grow up together. But it's still kind of this huge family that's kind of part of.
Yeah, you did mention that. Yeah.
Family. So yeah, it's either I get a stock photo in my head, or I get the real family. So I think that's really problematic. I am hoping to work with the Sunrise. I don't think I'm allowed to call it an orphanage anymore. I got told off by Geraldine, the founder, the other day for calling it. Used to be an orphanage, but they're not allowed to call that anymore. But I want to work with them and ask the students there how they feel about when they get lessons about families and things. How do they feel? They don't have a family. How uncomfortable is it for them? And I do think about the adults in my class that you know, maybe I have taught students who have left their children with their grandparents and come to another country to send money home. How must they feel when they're confronted with, you know, this model family of like mum, dad and kids all living in a, like, I don't know, 2-bedroom house in the suburbs? How do they feel about how their situation is? Because they're really doing something quite amazing, sending money home. But, you know, are they uncomfortable? Are they embarrassed? Do they feel, you know, that somehow this is a judgment against what they do?
Thank you.
And I think it doesn't just apply to the ESL classroom either. I think that in a lot of different subjects, maybe it might be worth looking at. I mean, in history, when I was studying history at school, I remember watching a TV show about the war called How We Used to Live, and it followed a family through the war. Well, families in the war lost people, and they lost whole parts of their family. Whole villages disappeared in terms of, you know, bombings and losing the young men in the village and things like that. So, like I said, it's not new to have a different structure to the family.
Super. Thank you.
Can I jump in now? Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Jim.
Catherine has a question. Yeah.
It's more of a comment and a reflection than a question. But this is such a great talk. It's so inspiring. I work in higher ed. And so my students have come out of English programs. And I notice where there's huge gaps in their vocabulary. You mentioned giving them the vocabulary to talk about a non-heteronormative nuclear family. And the other one is in certainly in Vietnam, and I don't know about Cambodia, but they have 2 sides to the family. The father's side is the inside family, and the mother's side is the outside family. And they have different words for aunties on each side of the family and different status. And so when they're trying to explain something, English doesn't really have enough words to explain the nuance of what they're talking about, and they really struggle. And the other one they really struggle with is interracial marriage. Like if they've got foreigners in their family, they call them foreigners, and they don't have other words to talk about interracial marriage or to talk about being mixed race. And they run out of vocabulary very quickly for anything racialized. And I have students saying, it's because I'm yellow. And, you know, to me, that's very shocking. And in the native speaker world, we would never use a word yellow to talk about identity or experience. But they don't have another word, so they use the vocabulary they've got. And I find that, you know, at higher ed level, I'm giving them suggestions for vocabulary, and then I think, why am I doing that? I shouldn't have to. If they've been through English for academic purposes or something like that, I shouldn't have to supplement their vocabulary. So it's speaking to this point that you mentioned about how out of date the textbooks are, especially around family. This issue of family is sort of very idealized nuclear family. And like you say, not many families actually are like that. So I found that it really resonates with what I deal with at first year level. So thank you for your talk. It's great.
It's good to hear it. Thank you, Catherine. If we haven't got any other comments or questions, we can end there.
Thank you all very much for hosting this and having us get involved. It's great.
Yeah, we'll invite
Wonderful,
you to the
yeah.
COP. We just need to work out, we need to get in to the platform and invite people into the COP. So yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'll do that.
As many.
We should have
as
a
many as-
SIG. We should have a special interest group for materials development. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.